So today Nicole and I are going to go over the Boston Diagnostic Aphasia Examination. We're going to give you a description of each subtest and then go over some of the items that would be administered in each. So the Bdae consists of 5 subtests: conversational and expository speech, auditory comprehension, oral expression, reading, and writing. Though there's not an official severity scale at the end, it helps give us an idea of the type and severity of aphasias that may be present. So the first subtest we're going to look at is conversational and expository speech. This subtest really looks at the examinee's ability to functionally communicate in terms of either fluency, word finding, phonemic errors, paraphasias, and also helps build a little bit of rapport between the examinee and the examiner. This subtest is comprised of 4 different sections. We have simple social responses, free conversation, and a picture description. So the first one we're going to go over is the simple social responses. Each of these responses is scored as either a 1 or a 0, where 1 is considered a correct response and a 0 is considered incorrect. Don't worry about keeping track of these. We'll go back over at the end and score these in the manual in terms of percentile ranks and what that might mean. So Nicole, I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. We'll get familiar with each other. For these, don't worry about giving me a long answer. A short one is completely fine.
Okay.
So the first is, how are you today?
I'm good.
So that would be judged as an appropriate response. So she would get a score of 1 there. Have you ever been here before?
No.
Do you think we can help you?
Yeah.
Do you think you can make any progress?
Yes.
When are you going to be leaving here?
3 o'clock.
And what is your full name?
Nicole Hall.
And what is your full address?
1000 Park Road.
So in this case, Nicole got all of the answers correct based on the information that we have. So she received a maximum score of 7 of 7. The next element of the first subtest is called free conversation. This is used to continue your rapport building and see how your examinee does in connected speech about a familiar topic. So, Nicole, I just want you to tell me a story, or it could be about someplace you've worked, what you did before your stroke, your family. It can be happy or sad. I'm just trying to judge your speech and my ability to understand.
Okay.
And also some of your strengths and weaknesses and how you get your message across.
Okay. Sister Alyssa in Milwaukee, and drive 1 hour, go to art building, paintings, and drive, restaurant, eat sandwiches, and drive home 2 hours. Fun time.
Great. Now, the next part is called a picture description, and this is when you move to the provided booklet. There is a separate booklet for the short form of the test and also the long version. Right now we're doing the short version for the sake of time. The long version overall would just be more thorough. So, Nicole, tell me everything that you see going on in this picture.
Mother, dishes, water, oh no, boy, son, cookie and falling, and the sister, cookie, garden, outside, dishes.
So the most important part of both the picture description and the free conversation is to try and get as close to a verbatim transcript as possible, even if this requires recording, because you're really looking to describe as many elements as possible and get the best picture of your examinee's abilities. So based on those 3 samples, you're going to take 2 measures. The first is an aphasia severity rating scale. It is from 0 to 5, where 0 is no usable speech, and 5 is considered minimal discernible speech handicap. The patient may have subjective difficulties that are not obvious to the listener, meaning that it's pretty easy to understand them and that some people might not even pick up that the speaker is having difficulty getting their message across. Based on Nicole's speech, we would probably put her maybe a 2 or a 3, so she is able to talk about familiar subjects with the help from the listener, but there are frequent failures to convey the idea, but the patient shares the burden of communication. And a 3 would be, the patient can discuss almost all everyday problems with little or no assistance. Reductions of speech and or comprehension, however, makes conversation about certain material difficult or impossible. So it would be subjectively up to you to decide where she would fall on that. The next rating scale is just a profile of different speech characteristics. For example, her articulation, her phrase length, her grammatical form, melodic line, different paraphasias that may be present, and word finding relative to fluency. For most of these, you are rating on a scale from 1 to 7, where 1 is considered an inability to produce the element, and 7 is no impairment. The exception is phrase length, which you measure by the amount of average words in a phrase. So the next subtest we're going to go over is auditory comprehension. This is basically the examinee's ability to respond to prompts, whether they be a picture prompt or a command. It consists of 3 sections: word comprehension, commands, and complex ideational material. The first section is word comprehension, where the examiner states either a body part or an object, and the examinee has to correctly identify that body part or object. Responses are scored from either a 0, which is no response, or an incorrect response, half a point, which is a correct response but after 5 seconds, or a full point, which is an immediate response and no latency. So, Nicole, I'm going to say some words, and I want you to either point to your body part or the picture in the book that matches the word I say.
Okay.
Show me your shoulder. So in this case, we would have to score a 0 because Nicole showed me her elbow rather than her shoulder. Show me your cheek. That would be considered a correct and immediate response. Now we will move into the record booklet, and as you'll see, there are a couple pictures, and one of them will match the word that I name. So the first, show me the candle. Good. That would be an example of a response that was correct but took more than 5 seconds. So we'll continue on. Show me the bear. And the peanut. So you can't see this, but this time Nicole pointed to the cheese, so she would again receive a score of 0 for the line that has peanut written on it. Show me the shirt. Good. And the bus. The saw. In this case, Nicole pointed to the hammer. The ant. And the tulip. Good. Now we're going to show her some colors and have her do the same thing. So show me the color blue. Now show me the color brown. So the first response of show me the color blue was correctly chosen within 5 seconds. The second choice, show me brown, was chosen correctly but after 5 seconds. Show me the letter T. Now show me the letter N. Show me the number 4. That would be considered an incorrect response as she pointed to the number 2. And show me the number 13. That would be considered a correct response. If you were to look down your record form, you'd see that Nicole lost 1 point for shoulder, half a point for one of the object names, also half a point for one of the colors, and then another full point for one of the numbers. So if you total those up, she lost 3 points total, which would be a score of 13 of 16. The next part of auditory comprehension is commands. So in this section, a point is given for each correct portion of the response. If you look at the record form, each response that's expected has a line underneath it. So for example, the first command, which is point to the ceiling and then to the floor, there's an underline under ceiling and then also floor. So Nicole, I'm now going to say some multi-step commands. Listen until I finish the command and then follow what I say. The first is point to the ceiling and then to the floor. In that case, the full point would be 2 points would be given because she followed each command correctly. The second question actually requires some manipulatives. So a pencil, a card, and a watch. In this case, she would have to put the pencil on top of the card and then put it back. Just a note, these manipulatives are not provided with the test. You have to bring them on your own. So your third question is tap each shoulder twice with 2 fingers, keeping your eyes shut. So she tapped each shoulder twice, but she only used 1 finger and her eyes were not shut. So she lost a total of 2 points on this subsection, which means that she received a 7 out of 9. So the final part of the auditory comprehension test is complex ideational material. So for each question, Nicole will be required to respond with either a yes or a no. This is really testing the ability for the examinee to agree or disagree with factual material which is presented verbally. So, will a cork sink in water?
No.
Can you use a hammer to pound nails?
Yes.
Will a stone sink in water?
No.
Is a hammer good for cutting wood?
Yes.
So the second portion looks at a story that precedes the questions. So first the examiner reads the story and lets the examinee know that there will be questions asked afterwards and that they should try to remember the details from the story. So I'm going to read you a short story and then I'll ask you some questions about it. Are you ready?
Yes.
So Mr. Jones had to go to New York. He decided to take a train. His wife drove him to the station, but on the way they had a flat tire. However, they arrived at the station just in time for him to catch the train. Did Mr. Jones miss his train?
No.
Was Mr. Jones going to New York?
Yes.
Did he get to the station on time?
No.
Was he on his way home from New York?
No.
So I'll read you another one. A customer walked into a hotel carrying a coil of rope in one hand and a suitcase in the other. The hotel clerk said, "Pardon me, sir, but will you tell me what the rope is for?" "Yes," replied the man, "that's my fire escape." "I'm sorry, sir," said the clerk, "but all guests carrying their fire escapes must pay in advance." Was the customer carrying a suitcase in each hand?
Yes.
Was the clerk suspicious of this guest?
Yes.
Was the customer carrying something unusual in one hand?
No.
And did the clerk trust the guest?
Yes.
So the way the scoring of this subtest works is you have 6 questions between the 3 activities. And in order to get a question correct, you have to answer correctly to the negative and the positive element. For example, will a cork sink in water? Your target answer is no. But will a stone sink in water? Your target answer is yes. In order to get credit for the question, both of those must be answered correctly. In Nicole's case, she answered no to both, so she would receive a score of 0 for that question. So just to go over that again, can you use a hammer to pound nails? She answered correctly with yes, but she also answered yes to, is a hammer good for cutting wood? So she would additionally get a 0 for the scoring of that question. So overall in this section, she received a score of 1 out of 6. Alright, so the third subtest is called oral expression. In the short version of this form, there are 3 portions that are included. They each look specifically at verbal sequencing and naming of objects. So the first portion is called automized sequencing, and it really looks at your examinee's ability to work through common sequences. So the example that you could give them is if I ask you to name each letter of the alphabet, and you would start with A, continue to B, C, D, and so on and so forth. So, Nicole, now I'm going to give you the names of some sequences that you will probably have encountered.
Okay.
Name each sequence as far as you can go. So for the first one, name the days of the week.
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday.
So in this case, Nicole missed both Wednesday and Saturday, so she would receive no points. In this subtest, 1 point can be given if you have 4 consecutive correct answers. For example, if she had gone Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, she would have been given 1 point. And 2 points can be given if the entire sequence is repeated correctly. So the next one we're going to do is I'm going to have you count to 21.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21.
In this case, she counted to 21 with no errors. She would receive a full 2 points. So for this section, she would receive a 2 out of 4 because she missed 2 points on the days of the week sequence. So for the rest of these subsections, in addition to counting correct or incorrect, you're going to look at error codes, which may be associated with paraphasias. So, for example, a non-word phonemically based paraphasic error or a verbal paraphasia. The test lists all of them that you might be interested in. And the remainder of the record booklet also has a space for the error code. So The next section is repetition of both single words and sentences. In order to score the full point, you need to have the examinee repeat exactly what you say. In addition to scoring the error code, this subsection adds in an articulation impairment. So if the word was produced incorrectly, you can write how it was produced. So I'm going to say some single words, and I'm going to have you repeat back exactly what I say.
Okay.
Brown.
Brown.
Chair.
Chair.
What.
What.
Emphasize.
Emphasis.
So instead of writing emphasize, she said emphasis. Methodist, Episcopal.
Methodist, Episcopal.
So for those 4 words, only one was produced incorrectly, so she would receive a score of 4 out of 5. So now we're going to increase the complexity a little bit, and I'm going to have you repeat full sentences for me. Remember to repeat exactly as I say. Father comes home.
Father comes home.
He picks up the paper from the coffee table.
He picks up the paper from the table.
So in this case, Nicole missed the word coffee, so she would lose a point and only score a 1 out of 2 for this section. So now we move on to the naming of various objects. So the first part is requiring the examinee to correctly respond to a question posed by the examiner. In this case, a score between 0 and 2 is given based on correctness and latency, just like before. So no response or an incorrect response is scored as 0. The correct response after 5 seconds is scored as 1, and the correct response is scored as a 2. So I'm going to ask you some questions now. I want you to respond with the object that best fits the answer to my question. What do we tell time with?
A clock.
What do we do with a razor?
Shave.
What do you do with soap?
Wash.
What do you do with a pencil?
Draw.
What do we cut paper with?
Pencil.
So in this case, the first 4 responses were considered correct, and each was given 2 points. The final response, however, was given 0 points, as Nicole replied that she would cut paper with a pencil. Therefore, she has a resulting score of 8 out of 10. The next subsection actually requires a separate test, the Boston naming test, and you administer the short form, which requires your examinee to name 15 objects from the BNT booklet. In this test, you can give different cueing types to help elicit the response. For example, a stimulus cue, so what the object's used for, a phonemic cue, so the first sound or 2, and then multiple choices that the object might be. In the booklet for the BNT, each of these has a separate option for scoring. So, Nicole, I'm going to show you some pictures, and I want you to name each one for me.
Okay.
What's this?
Comb.
And this?
A toothbrush.
This?
Octopus. Bench.
This?
Volcano.
This?
Canoe. Beaver.
This?
Cactus. Hammock. Stethoscope. Unicorn. I'm not sure what that one is.
So, photographers or surveyors use it?
I'm not sure still.
Okay. It's a tripod.
I don't know.
Okay, so do any of these options help you?
Easel?
Okay. So for that question, we would give a score of 0 because even with maximal cueing, she was not able to identify the object. So what is this?
I'm not sure again.
Okay. So it's found in Egypt.
I don't know.
Okay. What if I give you these choices?
Pyramid?
Okay. And this is our last one. What is this?
Easel.
Okay. What if I told you that artists use it?
I'm not sure.
Okay. What about a pa?
I don't know.
What if I give you these answers?
Paints.
Okay. So after we administered those 15 items, it looks like Nicole missed 3 of them total, the last 3. Tripod, Sphinx, and palette. So if we were to go back to the record form, she would have scored a 12 out of 15. So next on the naming portion, we're looking at the screening of special categories. So for this, we're going to move back to the booklet, and what happens is the examinee points to either a letter, a number, or a color, and the examinee has to name that. A score of 1 or 0 is given, 1 for a correct response and 0 for an incorrect. So what is this?
An S.
And this?
E.
And this?
T.
And this?
R.
So for numbers, she was able to identify and name all correctly. What's this?
7.
And this?
9. 15.
And this?
300.
So the last 2 were named incorrectly. They were supposed to have been 13 and 200. So 2 points would have been lost on number naming. So we move on to colors. What is this color?
Purple.
Okay, that was incorrect as it should have been red.
Green. Blue. Brown.
But she did get the rest of them right. So a total of 3 points were lost on the screening of special categories with a resulting score of 9 out of 12. The next subsection, the 4th one, is reading. So this looks at the individual's ability to recognize basic symbols, identify words, orally read aloud, and their reading comprehension. The first part is basic syllable recognition, or symbol rather. And what happens is the examinee is given a booklet, and the examiner points to a letter or a word and asks them to find the letter or word that matches that. Now, this letter or word is going to be in a different size or font, so it looks a little bit different. So we're looking at if they can transfer what they see into a different context. Each correct response gets a score of 1, and an incorrect response receives a score of 0. So, Nicole, this is a letter. I want you to find the matching letter in this line.
Okay.
And what about the match for that one? So instead of pointing to another F, Nicole pointed to a T. So a point would be lost there. And what about this? And this one? And again, instead of pointing to the word of, the word if was pointed to. So 2 points were lost, resulting in a total score of 2 out of 4. So the next section is number matching, in which the examiner holds up a number on her hand and asks the examinee to point to that number in her booklet. So I'm going to hold up a number of fingers. I want you to count those fingers and match it to a number in this first row. Okay. And what about this one in the second row? Okay. So instead of pointing to 4, the number 6 was pointed to. So a resulting score is 1 out of 2. So now you'll see a number here. I want you to point to the resulting dot pattern in this row. And what about this number? Good. So both points were given on that. So for number matching, her total score would be a 3 out of 4. So the next section is word identification. So this is the examinee's ability to demonstrate looking at a picture and then finding the resulting name that matches that picture. So each correct response receives 1 point and each incorrect is 0 points. So Nicole, you're going to see an object and I want you to find the name that matches the object.
Okay.
So when a picture of a clock was presented, Nicole picked watch, which would be considered an incorrect response. Okay, what about this? And this? Okay, that question also lost a point. And this final one? Good. So 2 out of 4 possible points were scored for this question. So the next section looks at the examinee's ability to read printed words out loud. So she's presented with a list of words and asked to read through each. Points are either a 0, which is a fail, 1 point if they respond between 10 and 30 seconds, 2 points if they respond between 3 and 10 seconds, and 3 points if they respond correctly within 3 seconds. So I'm just going to have you read down this word list for me. Read each out loud to me, please.
Okay. Chair, circle, hammock, purple, 15.
So in this case, all words were read correctly under 3 seconds, so a maximum score of 15 can be given. The next section is comprehension of what your examinee just read. They'll be provided with 3 sentences in their booklet, and each sentence has 4 choices to finish off the sentence. They are asked to provide the best response, which would receive a score of 1. Just a note, your examinee must read them either silently or out loud, but you cannot read any of the choices or the question for them. So Nicole, I'm going to have you read these sentences to yourself. Each is unfinished, and I want you to pick the word that best finishes the sentence based on the story you just read.
Okay. The weather was cool.
Okay.
Mary and Jim rode in a car. The trip took about 5 minutes.
So in this case, we saw that the weather was cool would be an incorrect statement, as well as the trip took about 5 minutes. The correct answers would be sunny and 45 minutes. Therefore, she would receive a score of 2 out of 3. So the next section also deals with reading comprehension. There will be 4 different unfinished statements from which the examiner is asked to finish. These statements, however, are not based off of a reading, but prior knowledge. You are allowed to read the example sentences to the examinee, but you are not allowed to read the actual questions. So for one of our examples, you have water is, so you would instruct the examinee, say, okay, here are some more unfinished statements, but these are based on your prior knowledge. I want you to read out the sentence and then pick the best option.
Okay.
For example, you could say water is
wet.
And children play
Ball.
Good. So after those two examples are given, the examinee is then requested to read them to herself on the next page and pick the best answer. Great. Now I want you to try these ones on your own now that you understand how the process works.
Okay.
Remember, read out the sentence and pick the option that best finishes it.
Okay. A dog can bark. Mr. Jones gives haircuts and shampoos. He is a butcher. Schools and roads cost money. We all pay for them through taxes. Aluminum was once very costly to refine. Now electricity has solved the refining problem and aluminum has become very strong.
So as you can see, two statements were finished incorrectly. Mr. Jones gives haircuts and shampoos. He is a. Nicole answered butcher when the correct response would have been barber. And aluminum was once very costly to refine. Now electricity has solved the refining problem and aluminum has become. The correct answer here would have been much cheaper. So the final subsection is writing, and it is comprised of 4 different activities. The first is called Mechanics of Writing, in which the examiner provides the examinee with a sheet of paper and gives them some tasks to write about. So for example, a signature or dictated letters. Everything at the end is going to be scored for the well-formedness of letters. So are they all well-formed, only partly formed, or illegible? Also the correctness of letters. Were they correct with no errors, half correct, less than half correct, or were there greater than 2 incorrect? And finally, motor facility. So was it laborious to write or was it pretty easy? So now I'm going to have you write some things for me. The first thing is I want you to sign your name.
Okay.
Okay, now I want you to print your name.
Okay.
Now I'm going to say some letters and I'm going to have you write each after me.
Okay.
So T, G, R, S, and B. Now we move to this page and copy this sentence in cursive and then in print.
Okay.
And now I want you to write the numbers 1 through 10.
Okay.
Good. Now the numbers that I will say for you. The number 2, 12, 9, 11, and 6. Okay. So looking at the writing, it looks like all of her letters were really well formed. There weren't any issues, everything was legible. So she would score a maximum of 2 points for each of the items. And for correctness of letters, looking at it, there were a few errors. For example, 7 was written for 6 and S was written for R. So that was still less than half of the letters or numbers, so she would receive a 2 rather than a 3 for both dictated letters and dictated numbers. So that would leave her total score at 19 out of 21 for letter choice. And finally, for motor facility, there were no issues. Everything was smooth. It didn't seem difficult, so she would receive the score of 14 out of 14. The next section is basic encoding skills, and this is where the examiner reads out loud some words, basic primer vocabulary, regular phonics, and then some irregular words. This is just looking at the ability to spell and then write the message. So now I'm going to have you spell some words for me and just write them down. So cat, run, go, dog. Each of the words was written correctly, so she would receive a score of 4 out of 4. So now we're going to try a couple more difficult ones.
Okay.
How about flag? Apartment. Okay. Nation. Knife. And cough. In this case, the word apartment was missing a couple of vowels, so she would lose some points there. But otherwise, she spelled all words correctly. So now I'm going to show you some pictures. Do you know what this picture is?
Tree.
Good. Can you write the name of each of these pictures?
Sure.
Each of these elements are also scored as either correct or incorrect. So a 1 or a 0. And as there's 4 pictures, there's a maximum of 4 points. So what is this object? Can you name it for me? Is there another word for a boat?
Oh, canoe.
Can you try spelling that?
Okay.
Okay. And then what about this object? It's not a plant, but it's something you might hang plants on.
I'm not sure.
Okay. And so in this case, one of the words trellis was identified incorrectly. So a score of 3 or 4 would be given. Now, the last part of the test is called narrative writing. And this goes back to the cookie thief picture. And the directions are pretty much the same as before. You ask them to look at the picture and write about it as much as possible for a total of 3 minutes. So here's the same picture you saw before. Just like before, I want you to tell me the story to the best of your ability. You can write down some of the things you said before or anything else you've thought of since. Go ahead.
Okay.
So let's say that 3 minutes has passed. So you can look at your scoring sheet. Just like before, you have some mechanics. So are letters well formed and legible, or are they mostly illegible? In this case, they're completely legible, so a score of 2 can be given. Vocabulary axis, it looks alright, but a little bit minimal. There's not a lot of action words, it's mostly nouns. So I'd say some important words are missing, so she could score a 2 out of a 3 for this section. Syntax, there's definitely some deficits in sentence structure. They're very short, just a couple of words. Girl help brother. So we would also give that a 2 out of 3. And adequacy of content, it's very adequate, but definitely incomplete. There's a lot more that she could have written. So this would also be a score of 2 of 3. So those 4 areas are totaled to be 8, so 8 out of 11. So after you administer the test, you go back and take the scores and transfer them to a summary profile sheet that looks like this. Essentially, it lists each subtest and the individual sections with each subtest, and you can find your rating score and transfer it to the sheet and circle it. So for example, for basic word discrimination, we had a score of 13. And once you circle that, you can run your finger up, and that corresponds to a percentile ranking. In this case, 30%. So you can see we circled the 13, and it corresponds to 30%. And at the end, after you've transferred all of these scores, you can draw lines between them, as well as the rating scale profile that we went over in the very beginning. And these can be compared to the manual and give you a basic idea of the potential type of aphasia that's present. In our case, our rating scale profile matched pretty closely with a Broca's aphasia. But as you can see through the manual, other types of aphasia are also listed, and that helps you basically plan treatment goals and allows you to see what areas are very difficult for the examinee, and then knowing, I don't even know, stop this.